For anyone joining us online, welcome to part 4 of Discovering Who We Are with Arlen Vernava from All Saints Church in Washington Courthouse, Ohio.
Joe, grab Scribbler's Yen.
That's right.
Yay. Yep. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you'll. Yeah, brother. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks.
So, whichever size you want of one of these, we will be doing some marking them up. You want large or small? Large or small? Large or small?
Did you grab that? You're welcome.
Nobody took a larger.
I'll take whatever you have.
Oh, I've got enough anyway. Yes.
Thank you.
He, Arlen was to that microphone one is the handheld. I thought you were saying you wanted 2 of these. You want large or small? Get it, guys?
Lousy, I must say. Everything's small. Everything's small.
Anybody else need a writing implement?
Yeah, you're gonna do some work. God, I know. And it deserves to be in your mouth and your belly. That's what I always say when I spill something. I say, what a waste. I just wasted that little bit.
Well, there was that Pastoral customer where the person spilled it on a hanging tapestry and got all upset and squeezed the coffee back out of the tapestry. So he was not upset about hitting this ancient tapestry, it was about losing the coffee.
Losing the coffee. That's very funny.
Somebody's in the kitchen.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
Oh, and Sue.
I guess it will work for me.
I can't see this very well.
Yeah, I was like, well.
Sue comes back and asks where's the barrel? Where's the barrel? She asked me earlier, you know that song, Barrel Over the Mountain?
Yeah.
So we were supposed to ask you where the bear went.
The other side is round. Right.
Who is it that went around that? She'll be coming around the mountain.
That was for next week.
We only have I can go find some tape.
No, I'm just making sure that.
We'll be wearing old pajamas when she comes.
We'll be wearing wool pajamas.
Yeah.
Oh, there's tons of her.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll all go out to meet her when she comes.
Yes.
The verses just go on.
Sounds like we're using, Old McDonald with, it turns into, there's no animals, it turns into Old McDonald's got a meeting, and Old McDonald has a dad. Right, Old boy's an animal, so it no. Then turns into pets.
Well, everyone, you've all done some great work with figuring out what those words are, right? Figuring out what these core values are. And it looks like you've done a great job at beginning to try to describe them. And so, I'm going to try to do a couple of things for a while this afternoon. I think one is to, maybe it's in this probably a part A and a part B and a part C to some of this, but one thing is to sort of look at these, to look at these core values and I'm going to ask you some questions about them in order to help you to get a little bit more clarity, even more clarity than you have. So that's one part of it. Another part of it then is to take these core values and rather than to describe them as you've done, and that's part of why you have the paper, the paper to write with, is to begin to play around with your elevator speech. Because if these core values are in the bones of all saints, and that's what they mean, right? The core values are in the bones of all saints. Then, whether you're in Kroger talking to a checkout person who just happens to say, "Oh, tell me about all saints," or whether you're anywhere, there should be on your lips a way to express those core values in a kind of elevator speech. You know what I mean? That in a matter of about 20 seconds, you're able to say and express these values, in a sense, using these words in a sentence, not telling them what they're about, but telling them what they actually are. Right? So tell me about all saints, and you'd be able to say something like love and acceptance and faith and action and presence of God and worship and wandering. So part of what we want to do is figure out whether all of those are going to stay in play or whether they're going to even collapse and become fewer. But I'm going to invite you to play around with some kind of a little elevator speech for yourself, which is at first for yourself, but then an elevator speech that everybody sort of owns. You might say it in your own words, but in a sense, you'll all be in agreement as to what is that messaging. So this is not about marketing so much as it is about all having a way to say to the stranger or to the visitor or to one another, this is all saints, right? This is all saints. And then the last thing we'll do is begin to answer the question, so how do these become operational? If our core values are what we stand on, in what way do they become ministry mission program? Right? How do they actually become operational? Because that's the difference between an organization that has core values up on their wall, but that's all they are, they're just up on the wall, and an organization that has the core values in their bones, on their lips and their heart, because then they're operational. And they're reflected in the budget, right? I mean, you can look at your giving. They are everywhere. They're everywhere. Sound like a bit of a plan? So let's begin with love and acceptance, and I'm looking at the first sentence on the front page, and then there is a first sentence, there is a sentence on the back page, and there's two options there. So take a look and just read those to yourself again, just so you're sort of familiar with, because this is stuff that you all have sort of said already. Love and accept all as they are, who they once were, and who they are still yet to be. Show love and acceptance through listening with your ears and your heart. Judgment is God's, not ours. Teach others while learning ourselves. Love and acceptance is welcome and support to all. Caring to those we know and do not yet know. Unconditional love in response to God's love. And open hands and open hearts to all. So maybe on your piece of paper, I want you to write down for me who are the all that you're talking about. And I don't want you to say all means everyone, because again, that's a generality. I want you to name who is the all. Are the all people who are physically disabled? Are the all people who are transgender? Are the all people who have no use of one of their senses? They are blind, they are deaf, they cannot speak. Are the all people who are non-binary in their understanding of their sexual being? So who is all? I want you to name it on your list. List them, because the all is a part of your elevator speech. You can't just, you need to know who you mean when you say all. So who's all? Okay, go ahead and stop wherever you happen to be. And so what I'd like to do is just simply go around the room and name just one that you have on your list, because as we go around the room, you might end up hearing one that's on your list, so you can sort of put a check next to it, and we'll just go around the room as many times as we have to get them all. So, what's one?
Individuals. Nouns or?
Okay, so,
Those we meet but do not know.
I got it. So, what does individuals mean?
Those we meet but do not know.
So you mean like the stranger?
Yeah.
Mentally ill? Yep.
Broad stroke, I started with all humanity.
Okay. That's a broad stroke. For sure.
Those who feel moved.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who needs help.
Okay. So I'm going to underline that word help again, and that word again because they both need defining, and because who is it that you're thinking of that needs help? So what is help equal? Right? What is so? Just think about what is help equal. Next.
All right, so I put it all equals God's creation of humankind, all humankind.
Yeah. So that's all humanity.
Which is the same thing, because we look at us, we created the image of God, so.
Yeah.
We
So
don't know what God
okay.
is like.
right. So that echoes that. Yep. What's
I wrote down, all who enter the building, but not having second thoughts about you entering the building.
okay?
All who show up.
Okay. Got it?
Those who might ask a question about what we do behind the walls of this church,
Those who ask.
just like, what are we doing? I mean, it's a lot of people, they've probably heard the word of God, but they have no clue.
Mm-hmm.
I said age,
Age.
all age.
All ages. Mm-hmm.
All that would come to this church, period.
Okay, we've already named them. Okay.
Those who question God's existence.
Those who questions God's existence. Okay.
I had LGBTQ plus.
Let's go around again if we have, do we have?
Did you have something, Victoria?
Oh, sorry, Victoria?
The forgotten.
The forgotten.
Yep.
Do you have a second?
At first I was thinking of the poor, but then I thought the wealthy as well can be lonely and left out.
Okay. The second one? The second.
Physically handicapped.
Physically handicapped. Right. more? Something different? Something more?
I just had those that were in need of help.
Yeah, yep, yeah, got it.
To me, all was race, color, creed, orientation, disabled, age, or past. So I went a little more, some of those are up there, some aren't.
Yeah, they are, yeah, you're naming that, yeah, go ahead.
My first one was inclusive.
Inclusive. Yeah. Got it. Okay,
Anyone searching for meaning.
okay. So that's a little bit different from God's existence, I guess.
Refugees?
Refugees.
Victoria?
Nothing different.
Okay.
Anybody have anything more to add that's not already on the list? Homeless.
And outcast.
Outcast.
To go with that, sinners.
Mm-hmm.
We just, all of us. I don't want that here.
Anything else? Okay. So another way to think about this list is that these are your publics. And if for a moment, when you kind of set aside those that are already inside, so you're part of that public too. But for a moment, let's just say, so you're here, right? You're on the inside. You're part of the community. You're already counting yourself as one of the all. So you have just named a number of publics, in a sense, from the very broad of the stranger to you, to the more specific mentally ill or feel bullied or LGBTQ plus, to the physically handicapped, to the refugee, the homeless. So if you put a check mark to those that I just named specifically, that you just named, but I just looked it up again. So the question then that really follows is, are you, All Saints congregation, ready to create, or if already created, to more robustly fund with money, time, talent, and resources, addressing the public called mentally ill, feel bullied, LGBTQI+, physically handicapped, refugees, homeless. Are you ready tomorrow to do that? Are you ready beginning your next budget year to do that? Are you ready to spend your time as church doing that? That's your ministry. That's your public. Your public isn't each other. Your public that's your public. That's the source of Christ's love. That's faith in action. that's who you're inviting to worship, even if it doesn't mean that they worship in this space. It's who you're inviting into an encounter with the holy. That's who you are. That's who you are identifying, who are wandering. They are wandering. So maybe take a little bit of a self-test, and on a scale of 1 to 3 or 0 to 3, if you're not really at all, if it's just aspirational, if it's like, well, of course we're supposed to do that, but I'm not ready to give any of my time, any of my talent, or any of my money to that. I don't want to, and not I specifically, but meaning all saints, that this is, if this is not that this is the direction of our ministry. These are the recipients of your ministry. That's what you just named. If it's a core value, right? If it's a core value, these are the recipients of your ministry. So how committed are you? In other words, how true is it? Is it aspirational, or is it really what and where you need to be directing your resources? Help me out here, folks.
Okay. Refugees here is very much an aspirational thing. It's not, we don't have a history of doing anything with refugees, do we? It's something that's been talked about every once in a while, but never gotten anywhere.
Don't you really have it?
There are refugees that are sponsored in this community, but we haven't done it. There are a number of families sponsored in this community.
So a reminder that
Probably know better what the numbers are. How do you know about refugees that are going to courthouse school?
I didn't know we had it.
Okay, we do, but it's not a big thing.
So a reminder that core values are not nostalgic and they're not aspirational. Core values are what is true for us. And if they're aspirational, it's the sense of very near term, meaning, oh, so maybe we aren't, maybe today we are not actively doing that, but we know that tomorrow we're actively doing that. Whatever the that is.
I'd say we're probably about a 1 for the LGBTQ+. There is stuff happening, but it's currently fairly minimal.
So in this case, it doesn't matter, the scope is not what we're measuring. We're not measuring the scope of it. We're measuring whether or not, as you're kind of discerning here for a moment, we're measuring whether that all feels to you like, if you're not engaged in it, whether a little bit or a whole lot, that you will engage in it, and you will, and it's not a test run. It's not, let's try this and see what happens. It's we have no choice. We must do this. It is it is a fire in our belly. If we don't do this, then we are not living our core value. If we don't do this, we are really not All Saints Church. That's what I'm talking about. Whether it's the the how much of it becomes a practical issue that you ramp up with, right? At some point, you'll do a lot of it or only a little of it, but you'll do it because it's a fire in your belly. It is written on your heart. It's not a test run. It's not to see what will happen. You can't control the response. You can't control the response. So what on here is aspirational? I mean, truly aspirational. That, wow, that would be great if we could be doing that. Wouldn't that be lovely? I want to click my heels 3 times and it will happen. So refugees, is it aspirational? The homeless, is it aspirational? The physically handicapped, is it aspirational? No. I heard a no. LGBTQI+, is that aspirational? Are you ready to, do you have your rainbow flag ordered? Are you putting your rainbow flag out in front? That's, if it's aspirational, you don't have your rainbow flag ordered. Yeah.
It's in our symbol for the church.
Yeah. And so let me invite you to maybe a different angle on this. As you wrote that list, what was most on your kind of on your motivation that that everyone on that list is, of course, welcome to find their way into this community of faith. They need to have the agency to find their way in. Was that most on your mind as you were writing, as you were thinking about whatever you wrote down? Or were you thinking mostly everyone on that list are persons that we are seeking? We are seeking. You follow the distinction I'm making? So what was most on your mind? That your role is to be passive in the sense of we're offering a place, we're offering a community, and if any of these folks find their way to us, hallelujah, we will welcome them with open hands. I'm not saying it's easy or hard. I'm really asking what is on your mind? What is on your mind? Because if that's the case, then that's also part of your core value. Yes. Yes. So my question right now is you're thinking that should they find their way here, of course they are welcome and will be embraced with open hearts and open hands? Or where are you on that continuum from that to we take church, we take Christ's love to the community where those folks live and move and have their being? That's what we do as all saints. So that would be this side of the continuum.
Well, we have to be very honest with ourselves. I mean, some of that stuff up there, it's very easy to say we're going to accept it, but if they come in, will we accept it?
It's nice, it's very easy to put on paper.
Right.
It is.
But then do it in action.
Yes.
Different story.
It is. And understand that today today, this is in fact our conversation, and really the only reason that we're doing this work at all is to move from what's on paper to what is actionable.
But the goal is, if anybody does come, they are welcome. We must be there in some particular cases of other churches, they're not welcome.
And that's one of the things that was actually very forefront in my mind here when creating this list is, Christianity is readily available in this community, but there's a large group of people that are rejected by most of Christianity here. And if we were to actively seek out people in need, that's the area where a lot of people in this list are served by pretty much all of the churches. But there's some here that aren't.
In other words, we have to be very honest. We are going to say that we are open with, like, to be honest, LGBTQ plus. If they show up, are we going to get uncomfortable and say, oh, they're actually here?
But how are we gonna know who all these people are unless there's somebody with a handicap? You might notice that they have a handicap, but I don't think LGBTQ whatever has it written on their chest.
Well, it depends on who they are, you're 100%.
Some do,
No.
some don't.
Behavior.
Right.
That's where people start judging is by human behavior, whether they are poor, whether they walk in with a limp, whether they have a speech impediment, or they look gay, or act gay.
Sure.
That's
Or-
where we make our judgment calls.
Or whether they're an active 2-year-old.
If-
And we have the struggles of,
Yeah, an active 2-year-old who, yeah. Yeah, right. Like, what's that child doing running around and talking and making noise?
And so we've actually had some of these discussions about what it truly means to be accepting around that issue.
Yes.
I would rather, I think I'm speaking to the choir, but I'd rather have Ian and you running around than we having to go out there and having to run around in this service. But yeah. I mean, we have to be very honest. We are willing
To be uncomfortable.
yeah.
And that's fine.
Or do we just want to pay lip service, like some churches that say, yes, everybody's in here, oh God, they actually can't. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Everybody's welcome, but not you.
Yeah, and unfortunately we all know that there are churches like that in Washington Courthouse,
Yeah.
Everybody's welcome, no.
Not only in Washington Courthouse, everywhere. Everywhere.
Everyone.
Yeah.
You're 100% right there.
Yeah.
Personally, I am okay with all of those that are circled. And I will try my best to make them feel comfortable here, but I also, we need to be honest, is that something that we're all willing to do, or is that something we don't want? We don't want to advocate that we're something and then have members go, well, I'm not. And we've already lost too many people, so we need to be very honest with what we are for.
Yeah.
I mean, and I say this, but if we're a church that's, well, we want everybody to come as long as you're white and, hopefully you're okay to shower and, you don't have any issues.
Yeah. Your clarity is in fact attractional. And because it's attractional, it doesn't attract everybody because you have clarity. And so at the point of clarity, you are likely, as is every community when they finally get clear, it is likely and possible that some folks who are here walk away and stay away.
Some of it has to do with the liturgy. There was a fellow that we had served when we used to have the well at Sunnyside, and he would come in, and he came in here, and granted, he never did smell very good, excuse me, God, I'm sorry, but he was so lost in the liturgy, he had no idea. And he was not illiterate, but he was lost in all the
Sure.
things that we do in our liturgical service.
to give you permission for a moment to I mean, that's a wonderful and important story and value that you're picking up. You don't have to solve that today. Instead, what you have to know is this, that for everything that you claim that is true for this community of faith, then you absolutely will need to take steps to living into it. And so, for instance, persons who are strangers, whether they are walk in dressed like me or walk in dressed, half clothed, if they're strangers, there's a pretty good chance that they haven't a clue about the liturgy. It's pretty clear that they don't know what that means up there, that sign. They don't have a clue. It's possible, it's even possible that they don't have nearly the same association that you have for these wooden objects on the wall. And so, if the stranger is essential for you, if ministry to the stranger is essential, then therefore you will, as community, take concrete steps to find ways so that that stranger is comfortable within your liturgical and physical space, which is another kind of conversation which has its own challenges, yeah? But the difference between that and having that conversation without the core value clear is that you have the core value, it's clear, and therefore you will have the conversation because it's a problem to solve now. It's not an issue about a line in the sand. You've already made your line in the sand. Strangers of every kind are here. Whether they smell okay or whether they don't really know. If you say Christ Jesus to them, they will say, yeah, maybe I've heard of Jesus. I don't know what Christ is. And what's Advent? Or someone who is had a lousy experience in every other church and is well-churched and they find their way here. So that whole breadth, right? But those will be problems to solve. And they will not divide you. They will only be about how do we figure it out? How do we figure it out? If you start with that, however, if you start with, our liturgy isn't friendly, then that becomes the thing that you argue about, or that becomes the stumbling block.
Well, liturgy for the Lutheran and Episcopal is a stumbling block for many people.
And so that becomes, I would say then, unless you decide to no longer, and I don't know how you do this, but no longer follow any liturgy. And you can't, right? And so that in itself becomes a line in the sand. And that's going to be okay. But there's a difference between my sitting in this space, for instance, as a stranger with no church background, and feeling like I am completely an alien on another planet, and sitting in this space where there is someone who is with me and befriending me in the moment to help me move through it and quietly explain it, that lectors and priests are presenting things in a way that kind of makes sense, so that it becomes like anything else, I'm learning something new. It'll take me a little while to learn it, but it's clear that this community wants to be with me in my learning.
We'll walk you through it,
We're
rather
gonna-
than just abandon you to it.
That's right. That's right. In whatever practical way that ends up looking. Yeah. And for some, they're going to say liturgy's not for me. But there's the Baptist church down the road. Fantastic. Go to it. And
We have community churches that have, they do their own thing.
absolutely. Absolutely. You hear where I'm going with this. For every core value that you're clear about, there's implications. Right? There's implications. But the implications are not a stumbling block. The implications are problems to solve. If you want handicapped folks in here, you better cut some of these pews in a third so that you can put a wheelchair in there. That becomes a problem to solve. But you can't say, we want differently abled people in this space without doing that. If you have somebody that walks in who is deaf, you better have begin to figure out who's going to sign for them. Right? I mean, there's all kinds of implications for this. So it's not enough to just say everyone is welcome. We're going to embrace them with open hands and arms. What good is it if some of these publics walk in this door but then walk out that door because your yes is really not a yes, which comes back to that question. So let's get to it. We're talking about it. Let's get to it. Who's the or? Is mentally ill one of the alls? You ready to move alongside somebody who comes in here who might not be quite on their meds, or their meds don't completely regulate everything, and so they act a little bit different. They have some physical traits that are not, so to speak, normative. Do you have someone in this community that's comfortable with that, who understands that, who will sit with them, befriend them?
I see some head nodding, but sort of tentative head nodding.
Well, we're not trained. I said we're not all trained.
No, we're not all trained, but I mean, it's not, sometimes it's about training, sometimes it's at that initial stage of just being comfortable enough to be with, to not be scared away.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a comment.
Good.
It seems to me that there are a lot of individuals here,
Yeah.
certainly in town,
Mm.
and some people here currently work with the mentally ill, some people within St. Andrews do.
All saints, yeah.
Do these things.
Yeah.
Sue and I, when we used to work with mentally ill nursing home, do the service. There are people that do those things.
So the answer is sort of yes. Within your community, you've got folks who have a sense of, oh, if someone really does walk in, yeah, I know how to be with them. Okay, so I'm going to put a check next to that yeah, maybe that's a public that is, yeah, okay. How about feel bullied? Feel bullied. What about that sort of? That's a big, broad thing. I'm guessing you're thinking about people who are experiencing. Is that bullied because they are being abused by their spouse, or is that bullied because they're 12 years old and they're getting cranked on by school friends? What kind of bullying are we talking about? Is it both?
We definitely have the seconds within our community. People tend to be a little bit less open about domestic issues often.
And are we gonna be able to spot those people so that we can?
I suppose the idea is you want to make
Sometimes they come to me and
So do you sense that there are enough of you who are sort of kind and gentle grandmother, grandfather, aunt, uncle types, so that when that bully person, you know, we catch things by our senses, don't we? And a bully person will sense in a snap whether they feel safe or not. So is there a sense here that you create that energy? Then if you do, then maybe this is living in your bones. What about LGBTQI+?
That's important to me.
There are a number of people in this community that's very important. And how direct contact and exposure and
Okay.
practice.
Okay. How about physically handicapped?
Different levels, yes. Some handicaps are easier to accommodate than others and to work with. I know that there are people who have chosen not to come because if they need to go to the washroom during the service, they have to go past the front or go all the way around. So that is an issue. But
So you can't sit too long.
there are some that are more able to be here now that the seats are cushioned. We had some that really couldn't sit on the seats for.
And the walk-through there.
And we opened this up so that there's access without going up and down, and then people could come to the rail without having to climb up steps.
For sure.
So it's something that we are working to make better all the time.
Yeah.
I think if somebody showed up that needed, had a need, to help accommodate them or whatever.
Yes, I think we can check on that.
Refugees.
I think it's a situation where if anybody came here who was a refugee, they would be very welcome, even though they're not part of the local community, but it's not somebody that
We're talking people that don't speak English.
potentially.
Do we have people here that can help them?
Depends on from where. And sometimes my sister works with her diocese, with refugees, coordinating a refugee program in Vancouver. And a lot of that is not so much about the necessarily being present in church. It's more about being available to help put in contact with the people that they need, because they may not have any clue how to get in contact with different services and just getting things set up, knowing who to call if they need a trustworthy electrician, because they don't know anybody.
Are there services like that in town?
I don't know.
Some homeless refugees.
Yeah, a lot of work with refugees is about building that network of contacts. And we do have the stuff with housing, and I know who the contacts are for that, but, and in a lot of cases, refugees don't qualify for it, just because they're refugees, but they qualify for different things.
Remember, we're not talking about what the pastor does here. We're talking about what the community does. Core values are about the whole community, which includes your priest, your pastor priest. What about?
We are a very, I speak for Greenfield, where I'm
Homeless was the last one that I circled, which is again which is a little bit of a subcategory of all who show up and all humanity and the stranger and all ages and so forth.
I will say homeless is, in my opinion, one of those that we need to make a decision on, because homelessness kind of drove a very big wedge in the church, and I'm from the middle town, and kind of, I don't want to say kill it, but it definitely hurt our church, because we had a very big group of people that elected to take in homeless at the church, and we had a very big group of people that did not like that. And it really split the church down the middle, and we had quite a few people leave because they went all in on the homeless. And it turned to be very decisive in the congregation of, we don't want poor in our church, they might steal stuff, they smell, and we really redid the entire church to help the homelessness, and it was very divisive. So I think that's an interesting one that does need to be discussed.
I mean, they have facilities and these people stay there.
Oh, yeah, we did, we went the whole 9 yards. We decided we were gonna take in the homeless, and then they started coming to church, and then we decided, okay, we need to put these people here. We turned, it was, now granted, I came from a church that was 4 times the size of this, it was huge, because Marvin back in the day. But yeah, they retrofitted showers there, they set off the whole wing of the church for people to live there, and that really shook up a lot of people. And then we had other people that wanted to start putting locked-in doors and wanted to lock them into the wing at night, so we couldn't, it didn't go over well. So, I mean, I'm just saying,
So it was an attempt to make homelessness itself a core value,
yes,
rather than part of a bigger picture.
yeah, it was,
Someplace else and being.
yeah, I mean, they
church
did,
or-
I'm trying to remember the name for it, it was a big thing a while ago. It got very, this was when I was in college, when it was all going on, I hate to say it had disastrous consequences, the church
Yes.
never really come back from that.
Yes.
Which probably means it wasn't fully in line with our core values.
I believe so. And that's why I just said, if we are gonna open ourselves to homelessness, which is great, and I think that's a wonderful idea, but if we do have people that start showing up that are homeless, how far are we willing to go to help?
Yeah.
Or are we just say, hey, we're here for worship, and that's, when the service is over, so are we.
And that becomes part of, so if you're understanding that the homeless end up living, in that category of love, love acceptance, right? Then indeed the next conversation is something like, so how does that become actionable for us, given our people, material, and money resources? And there's no guilt around putting boundaries around that, because you are a congregation of a certain size, with a certain resources, right, and blah, blah, blah. You have a context. The thing of it is that this is a thing that you, with glad and generous hearts, respond to. And you respond to it within, again, some kind of a parameter. Yeah. So there isn't any question, for instance, about ministry with or to homeless. There'll never be needing to say, well, I'm not sure we should be doing that. You're saying, we're absolutely sure we should. What you may talk about is, so what's the scope of that? And you'll need to agree on that scope. I would suggest to you, those are the conversations that don't just happen once a year, they happen every single month at meetings. Those conversations are constant because your circumstances will change. I'm in a congregation in Cleveland, this congregation I'm serving in Cleveland, United Church of Christ congregation, went from being like dire in terms of its finances. This is a full generation ago, but they went from being completely dire in their finances to a gift that dropped to $500,000. So one day they weren't sure they could pay the rent, so to speak, and then the next day they had $500,000. And that money changed their context, right? It provided now a whole different way of being able to say yes to things they could never say yes to before. So that's what I mean by it's a monthly conversation, because you never know how the context will change, so that your ministry is always aligned with the reality of your situation and your community situation. But you don't have to debate whether or not this is of value. You're saying it is, or you're saying it's not. So I didn't put a check mark next to refugees or homeless yet. What's your pleasure? What are you thinking? What are you thinking that you want to step out on?
I'm overwhelmed by both of these.
Overwhelmed.
I personally, I can't speak.
No, thank you. Say it. So what is it? It feels like it's too much to chew at once.
It's scary.
It's scary.
Doesn't mean it can't be done.
No, but it feels scary. Yeah,
Others seem more doable.
they feel more doable to you. Got it. Who else wants to? You're all looking forward, but we're a small group. Just keep turning into each other here to see each other and talk.
A lot of this is what you were saying, the scope of it, of each of these things.
Yes.
That's the biggest thing. And some things like welcoming, or even transporting homeless people or refugees to the service is different from providing showers and a place to live. And it's all.
It is. And it's also the difference between having a kind of request or an ask that might, for instance, come through, in this case, to your pastor. And if these are off the plate at the moment, right, if they're off the plate, then when your pastor receives that request, what he says is, here are the persons in this community that can respond to you, and I will be in prayer for you. Rather than, oh, let me figure out how to help you get what you need. So what we're talking about again is the clarity, provides clarity for you all together, but also specifically to you as leaders. And without guilt. It's not that the refugees and the homeless don't matter, they do. The question instead is, what is God's deep gladness for us as a community? And how does that gladness then respond to our world's need? It can't respond to everything. Or rather, if it does, then wow, you are truly extraordinary.
One of the places that you didn't circle that I think actually should be
Go.
is all ages. And that's specifically because of what we're trying to do around children and youth.
Okay.
Specifically responding to the ages that we don't have here very much, including things like mail-out Sunday school stuff, trying to make it possible for kids to come for Sunday school even if their parents don't.
Yeah.
We've even had discussions around potentially figuring out how we can pick them up and bring them. This stuff, making the space available for youth for projects other than church. So that one is one that is active and.
Got it. All right, so
I can be cynical as well,
Yeah.
but I'd rather, say this. There's also that, I don't know if it's a fear or just a thought that we could make a huge decision on all this stuff and nothing changes. I mean, we've been saying, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I've been part of this church, we've been saying for years, we're open to anybody. Anybody can come in. Please come in. Anybody can come in. Nobody's coming in. And I say that, we could go out and fly a rainbow flag. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be rude when I say that.
No.
And say, hey, we're completely okay with LGBTQ plus coming to this church. Please come in. And they still may not come in. And
That's
that's
right.
my fear. I do fear that we're going to focus a lot of this on this, and 3 years from now, it's still the same people that are coming to this church.
Yeah,
And I don't say that, you know, I know where we stand in Fayette County, and sometimes all I hear is, oh, you go to that church next to the golf course? I didn't know people went there. You know?
yeah. So I think that word of, that kind of reality check is important. A few moments ago, I think I said, you know, you don't have control over the response. But I want to though say emphatically, you have total control over the invitation, over the ask, total control. And if your reality has been around the ask, then it's mostly passive, and that it's mostly mass media, you know, occasional advertisements and stuff, then saying yes to what's circled and checked is also saying yes to absolutely shifting from out of that passive posture. And what I mean by that, very simply, is that when each one of you are out in your world, you become apostles and advocates for Christ as members of this community of faith. That there is not a place that you are, or persons that you are ever with, where you are not befriending them as best as you know how, building a relationship with them, learning what their deep need is, and then at the right point, at the right moment, which only you and God, in a sense, they will know, you will say to them, perhaps for the first time, after 6 months or a year of not saying once that you are a member here, or even that you are a Christian, you will finally say to them something like, you know, I am part of this fantastic community that when I was going through something, they had me. And I'm wondering, maybe you'd like to meet some of those folks. And you say that because the moment is right, because their answer is yes. And then they still don't come to worship, but instead they meet you and your family, or you and your close friends. Now that's what I mean by getting it away from passive to being active. I'm not talking about flyers that you put in doorways, although that could be something that you do. I'm really talking about the difference between any one of us saying, the building is here, the doors are open, I love Jesus, folks are welcome, to instead my sitting with the people who I meet in my life and beginning to really truly befriend them enough that a moment arises when ministry, the invitation to be part of this community opens up. Am I saying anything that you haven't heard before?
We just we're doing some stuff around the idea of Baptist Church Sunday stuff. And part of the research around that is about the personal invitation being the most effective way to get people in the door. The other stuff just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so it's a different, that's a sort of wider personal invitation, not as specific as what you're talking. But it's the same concept, that it's that relational contact,
Yeah.
which is what actually will draw people in the door for the first time. And then how they experience that welcome when they're here
Because
is critical.
Because if you're talking, it seems like, and tell me that, maybe I've read what you've already written incorrectly, but it seems like that when you're talking about the stranger and all humanity and all who need help, and all who show up, that those are connected also to the idea of those who question God's existence, and those who are forgotten, and those who are lonely, and those who are searching for meaning, and those who are outcasts. Now, if I read that right, is that accurate? In other words, I'm asking you, is your motivation for everybody's welcome because if you don't get more members, then you're going to die as a church? Because if that's your motivation,
That might be your bottom line. But if you don't have the money to run the church, or you don't have members, you're not going to have a church. And you can't do any of the things that you listed.
yeah. And the question is, what's face forward, though? And I'd say if what's face forward is we need people, because if we don't have people, inevitably we die, then you're already screwed. But however,
I would say that probably is a motivation, but it is not the motivation.
yeah,
I mean, that's one of those things that we need it. We need it, but
yeah,
this understanding of all are welcome was prior to that.
okay,
It pre-exists.
okay, okay. So because the one, if to the extent that there is this sort of value of if we don't get more people, we're going to close, then that takes your sense of how you tell the good news about this place in a different direction than it does when you're talking about mentally ill, feel bullied, all ages, LGBTQ, physically handicapped, right? It takes a different direction, it takes a different energy. So I want to suggest to you that something like invite folks to worship, I want to suggest that there's a predicate to that, and that predicate to that, for those who are in fact searching for meaning, who don't think God may exist, who are outcast, all of that sort of stuff, it really begins with the level of credibility you have with them and they have with you at a basic relational level. Otherwise, you're inviting them to a program. Don't invite them to a program. Because worship, in a sense, is a bit of a program. Invite them into a relationship with you, which is into a relationship with God. Because you have a relationship with God. So their relationship with you is with God. It begins there. And once you have deep credibility at that level, then when their kids are like all crazy and they finally say to you, I don't know what to do with my kids, then you're able to say something, both from your experience with kids, but also to say something about how that happens in a powerfully positive way here. And that becomes a resource for them. And they trust it not because it's the church, but because it's you. And I think that's a critical difference for today in terms of making this actionable. Why should anybody believe it just because it's the church? They shouldn't. But they will believe it because they see, without even naming it, the Christ in you. They experience the Christ in you. So if you haven't written these down, write them down, because that's really your elevator speech, friends. Because you just named who it is that is the recipient of your core values. Besides yourself, that's the recipient of your core values. So all means the stranger. It means all ages. It means the mentally ill, the feeling bullied, the LGBTQI+, the physically handicapped, the outcast, those searching for meaning, the forgotten, the lonely and left out. Okay, so write your elevator speech. Take a break and then write your elevator speech. And your elevator speech sort of includes, this faith in action piece is I think, what's the word I'm looking for? I think it is an outcome of love and acceptance.
We were talking about it on the phone before Arlen came, the idea of, the worship and wandering, bringing us into that encounter with God, and the response to that is the faith in action. So the outward movement.
So, Pastor, so I mentioned this personal, talking to the person better than the paper store.
Yes. Yes.
Direct relationship.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, you're both picking up the sense of worship that is about public worship. What happens as you worship as a community, which is an essential value because that's feeding your souls. And you need to feel renewed, equipped, restored in order to then pour that back out into the lives of the rest of the world, yeah? So I think that needs to live in your narrative a little bit. That needs to live in your narrative, the sense of what is restoring that worship is restorative for you all, which is the presence of God. And I wonder if faith in action, in a sense, becomes, rather than a separate standalone, it becomes part of how you understand love acceptance. That love acceptance is, that love acceptance prompts one to faith in action. That worship is both what folks encounter when they encounter you, meaning they encounter a sign and symbol of the Christ, and it's also what you are encountering when you're together, the living Christ. All right, you have enough information to work with? You know what you're doing? So these are plain words that you're writing, and these are not theoretical. So you're kind of saying, so says the stranger. So says the stranger. Tell me about All Saints. And in about 30 seconds, you're going to somehow say to them this stuff. All Saints is a place. All Saints is a place where we do love and acceptance, and it looks like this. It's where our belly and our soul is fed. With peanut butter and that bakery bread.
Ginger cookies.
Ginger cookies.
I would put it differently, other people aren't talking enough. You're not talking too much.
I guess it's because I've been around this world longer than a lot of people have.
No more coffee, Susan. One thing, whenever my bathroom is back in church, we have one in my dad's church. You know, I mean, it wasn't soundproof. No. And of course, the kids would go back there and they would play and, yeah. Oh, no.
Not vacation. I'm on Saturday. I'm going to be very much this work.
Christmas tree problem.
We as a church. It wasn't very good. He was really nice. Yeah, he was quite nice. Very good. We dropped a little bit of something. About 20. No, she made a point of, once I was here, coming in a couple times to visit me, so that I would get to know her. So, I actually.
Thank you, Claudia.
It's back here. Oh, it's already.
I have to leave earlier than expected. My mom's supposed to be here at 3, she takes me 20 minutes, I'm not gonna wait, I have to do some for ovens.
Yeah, I got it out of the shed.
Okay.
In 3 pieces.
3 pieces. It's
Yeah,
actually
I
very
think it's
wearable.
3. And we need to plug in each piece to see if it lights.
Okay.
So plug that piece in.
Piece 1, that, plug it in.
If I plug that in, I'll let you people, so
I'll get it.
you guys can do it that way too. This piece.
And I'm looking for the,
Oh, it's right here.
okay, there's an outlet right behind you. That comes on.
All right. Yay for that piece. That piece lit.
It did?
Yep.
No?
Amazing how these fine cones have it going. Here you go. I got the piece. If you want.
That's, yes, okay.
No,
Yeah?
only half.
Only half?
Only half.
Okay, well, there may be another,
Okay, this top part, see, did not like.
okay, so
Okay, so
there's,
go
they must
ahead.
plug in together somewhere.
Well, yeah, that's all right, unplug it, and then we'll see if we can find it.
I feel like I'm the bottom of the Christmas
Yeah.
tree right now.
Yeah,
So somewhere on this, there's probably a thing that plugs together.
We hope.
yeah, that's why.
There's one.
I think it's one need. Back down.
What's the sound of the, oh, this whole string down here is not good.
Okay, so there must be more. So there were two there, plugged together. Maybe that I plugged them
Here.
Okay, so try and plug that in now. Oh, well. So now if you grab that other one, and plug that in here. We've got,
Okay, yep, so that all works.
We're still missing,
well, I've got two here that are.
That was probably plug into.
I put on.
There we go.
Oh, good, it all works.
Okay, so that
There's
works.
still another one here to plug the
Plug
next
something
thing.
into, but at least it all works.
Okay, great, so we can work with that. Alright, so
Oh, and there's another plug here. Yeah, there's one that's not there, but there's another plug here for it.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, because we have to plug into the other
So
section.
does this go into the bottom or the bottom?
This is the top, I think.
Okay, so is this the bottom?
I think
Or is that the bottom?
this is the mid, and then this is probably the bottom.
Yeah, this looks like bottom.
Okay.
Okay, so it's mostly that that one
This
has so
one-
many different strands
Strands
that
on
need to
it.
be plugged together properly.
Right,
And they're not all plugged together properly.
right. But we can figure that part out.
And then there's this base thing.
Do we need this?
I,
I don't know.
I think that's actually to go on the bottom of that
Bottom
when it's
of
not,
Oh, let you go in there, maybe?
the. No.
or when, to go on it when it's not in use or something,
Oh, that's
Oh,
what I was
that
thinking.
could be.
to protect this.
Gotcha. Unfortunately, I took the tree skirt home, so it's not molded.
So it's unfortunate that it's
No,
not
I
molding?
said-
I was gonna say, is that a good
I
thing?
said fortunately,
Oh,
Oh, I heard
I
unfortunately.
did too, I did too. Okay.
fortunately, I took the,
Now, is it,
alright,
should I
so
put
then
all the pieces together or should I put it up front or where we're gonna put it? This is-
we're gonna put it back here. I mean, we don't have any place to put it up front.
Well, if it were to go up front, it could go inside the altar rail in the left corner.
Inside the altar. In front of the ombre?
Well, in front of my chair.
In front of your chair, or take your chair out and put the tree in place?
Does it, I think the chair, is the chair attached to the wall? Or it
So
could
wait,
go,
this
it
is
could,
the-
we could take the other chair out too, on the right side.
It doesn't matter, we've had it up there.
Yeah.
Gail wouldn't let it, because we can only have a live tree up here.
Okay.
So-
I don't mind
Where are
it.
you doing, young lady?
So we could put it up there.
Yes.
Do you want it?
Not particularly, I'm just saying you could.
Well, if you don't really,
I would prefer it up here.
then we'll leave it. You're the priest, we'll do what the priest wants, just like I would have another tree put up here when Gail was.
No, I think most of the congregation is beyond the need of a fertility treatment.
I don't care.
And Brady doesn't want to be anywhere near it, so.
How much do we have to back up now?
I'm actually trying to figure out.
You want to get in on this conversation?
Is this the third one?
No.
Aren't
No,
they
I don't think so.
color coded usually?
No, this one's,
Oh, so we
This
don't
doesn't
use.
look like it's gonna fit in that spot, is it?
but this is, I think
Does
it's,
that pop out?
so do you think that's the middle and this is the bottom?
That's what my thought is. I think this is the bottom.
Okay.
That is a tapered in.
Yes. Tapered.
Taken firmly. Gotcha.
Yeah, that's good.
And this is the section we had so much trouble with because it has so many
Yeah,
strands
it's got there's
on
at least
it.
3 of them, yes.
Oh, there's probably,
Oh, you probably, actually, I think it's 4.
but we just have to make sure that we have one that plugs into each thing. I mean, one that plugs into the other. Yeah, the top one's easy.
That's the only thing, yeah, because one, I would definitely not plug it in incorrectly. Yeah,
Well-
because you can tell, like, there's, I don't think that's gonna work.
Right.
Maybe it will.
Well, yeah, as long as you plug this one in
Yeah.
and the next one. It doesn't matter how many you have in a sequence. Oh, where's that one? Right there.
There we go.
That one's only slightly new.
And Claudia will never again think it's a good idea not to buy a pre-lit tree. It will be a pre-lit tree the next time. Okay, I think my,
Whoa, something.
No, the only problem is it's definitely,
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a.
it's definitely not,
like, probably gonna,
okay. I've got four.
That's about.
Ah, there we go. Now we're down in here. We have to be into the stand.
For the little pigs to work.
Okay.
A little bit further back.
Which way? Towards the wall?
Towards
The front of the church.
So tighten the one that, yeah, you
We're gonna
just.
pull all of these out real fast and see.
Okay.
Better? Oh, the one at the back of the church. Okay. I guess that's what she did. She's not bad.
That's good.
that works?
I think it does. Thank you.
No problem. Do you want me to screw the floor or anything, or do you work?
Well, I think I want to try to get it plugged in so all the lights on.
That makes sense. All right, so let's see.
Okay, we just need to find the.
Yeah, like I got one in there. It needs to plug in 2. Let's see.
Theoretically, it should be the bottom of one plugs into the top of the next.
I'm looking for this. parts, so, plug in.
I got one in my hand.
I think I have this one.
Okay, so it plugs in. Oh, there's more over here. You should have a mail in somewhere close by.
Right here.
Oh, no.
It's all on together.
Oh, no, you're fine.
No, it's me, I mean, I'm the one that put it all together.
Well, it's just, we need to figure out where some of these end and some of these start, so to speak.
But see, if we don't have it plugged into this part, right, then it's not gonna.
Which basically means we just
We
need to
know
start
that
with the
everything
bottom.
lights.
Right, we lit everything up.
Right.
Currently, this one, these two are not connected.
Right. I'm trying to find the mail. So strange to say out loud.
Those and these. We need to find the end of the one that's lit up.
Got a huge group over here that's all plugged in together. I just don't know which of these, if any of them should be.
Or don't plug it one at a time.
Oh, okay, so none of these are plugged in. That's interesting.
Right, we need to trace that one that's lit up and figure out what.
I'm still here for a few more minutes.
Alright. I missed you.
I know you did. And I'm gonna write that date and time down to remind you.
He's getting wrapped up in cords, I think.
You have no idea. Excuse me.
Okay, so we need the female end of the church light.
That's what I'm trying to find.
Well, there's one right here that's not plugged into anything, so that could be it.
Well, we've got three that aren't plugged in there. That got, there we go.
That lights up more, at least at the base. Now we gotta find the secondary stuff.
Okay, oh, I got power in this one.
Also, okay, so that works.
Now we need to find some end to plug into this.
Crap, where they go, I just have to list it.
We are multitasking for sure.
Yeah, they can hear us.
We can.
Well, you wrote your little elevator speech.
No.
Yeah. It's a hard thing to write. So let me take a shot at it for you. All right, you want to just jot down some of the things that's on my mind as a way to kind of get your energy, you know, since we've lost some numbers. So look at that, it's lighting up.
Yay. Well,
Yeah,
So
bottom
this one has,
Boom.
part. Top part is,
oh.
Is that everything?
Yeah. woo-hoo!
So regardless of what we have.
Let there be light.
yeah, remember when we figured it out.
Lovely.
It may not be good, but it worked.
It will not meet electrical code. It's lit up.
Of course.
Ah.
I said, well, Paul could record two parts of it.
I did.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so for another few minutes, we'll set aside the canon just for a second to do this canon. So if I were an All Saints person, I might begin by saying something like, it's the place where I feel, because this is an I statement, right? It's a place where I feel loved and accepted. And I'm a weird duck. I'm a little skinny Italian man,
You don't use your hands.
and I don't use my hands enough, and I talk slowly, and yeah. So in other words, it's a place where I feel loved and accepted, and maybe a little something about how that is so for you. Because we're all a little bit odd and uniquely ourselves. And yet here I am loved and accepted. And then I think the pivot here is in All Saints people love and accept. And here's one of the ways that they do that. And now it's not something you tell about, but it's a story that you tell. Do you follow what I'm saying? It's not, well, they love and accept mentally ill and those who are bullied in all ages. No, you don't say that. What you say is, and All Saints people, they love and accept. I remember a time when, or not very long ago, or just the other day, and you say what you've witnessed. You tell your story about All Saints people. That's your elevator speech. Because in telling the story, in telling the first part of that, I feel loved and accepted. I'm diverted by my own bloody phone that I didn't put on stun. Okay. So coming up to that, up there, up on the wall there, or what's in front of you here. So by saying, I feel loved and accepted, and then telling a little story about how that is true, then you are talking about yourself as a wanderer who finds their way to God here at the center.
God and not to all saints.
To God. To God. Here at All Saints, but it's to God, right? Yeah. Yeah, I got it. Thank
Anybody
you.
hungry? You and I maybe heard more.
Thank you. And so you're telling your story, and it's your way then of talking about wandering and worship here at the center. And again, I don't necessarily mean that you're talking about worship and liturgy or the sermons or the prayers, although you may, that may be your story. But you're talking about your experience of the holy here, which is love at the center. So love and acceptance for you is here at the center, and you're going to talk about that. And then when you say, in All Saints people, they love and accept. And now you are talking about faith in action. Or, in other words, you're talking about all these things that we signaled, all the ways in which you have been part of that witness called All Saints people that have offered God's love, where God's love is action. So on this particular graphic, I would like to suggest, and this is again just my suggestion, rather than leave faith in action here at the top, my suggestion is that faith in action becomes the word faith the word in, and then action, so it sits in all four quadrants. And the arrow, you see these arrows are in, the arrows are out. In other words, faith in action is what happens when you, as an All Saints person and All Saints people, nourished from the center, now send that out into your world. Make sense? Now, I think your elevator speech takes that form. You don't have to adopt it, but I think that's sort of the form it takes. I experience love and acceptance. And here's how. Here's my story. And All Saints people do love and acceptance. And here's our story. So take a shot at it. Take 5 minutes and write your speech. Write it right now. Because you're really just claiming two stories. One on yourself and one that you know as part of the community. One that is about you finding your way to the center where you're nourished, and one about how the center, now that it's nourishing, sends that love back out into the world. And this is your story. Okay, take another 30 seconds. Okay, let's hear an I am loved and accepted. I'm loved and accepted. All saints, at all saints, I'm loved and accepted. Because, in what way? What's your story? Who's got a story?
I'll tell a story.
Okay.
I had 2 occasions where I fainted or whatever, passed out in this church. I think it's called Psycho. And everybody in the world tried to help me out. And the former pastor even came to church and some of the people. That's a good example of being accepted. And also, I've had Lutheran many, I'm known for fainting twice.
Beautiful, beautiful. How about another story of I am loved and accepted? Great. Yeah, say it loud.
Also, this is where I feel love and acceptance. I remember when I was first invited to attend my college. They introduced me to other members, and I was quickly included in church activities along with my daughter. Now I try to help any stranger in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
She knows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you tell the I am part, go ahead and say really specifically, how did they include you? How did you feel included? And what was that like for you? Yeah. Yeah. And then the flip of it is, I try to help in the same way. So what does that look like? What does that look like? Yeah. Beautiful. How about another story?
I love and accepted because I remember the first time I came, I was the only person who didn't have gray hair,
Mm-hmm.
but yet everyone commented and made me feel welcome by inviting me to lunch or by inviting me to coffee. I don't know if you want historically how we feel love and accepted.
It's your story.
And it hasn't changed since then. It has not changed. It's still a place of love and acceptance.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Great. Great. Another story.
I feel well accepted and accompanied with all saints because all saints made me feel welcome from day one with no strings attached. I came from Good Shepherd as a visitor and was told that since I was from Belgrade, I was a member of this church for my attendance and contributions to all saints. And you feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Another story.
I gave an interview in this community, and I came looking to see if there was anything which would tell me that this community should be eliminated from my list of possibilities. And I went home really knowing that this is where I was supposed to be. And that really was from that experience of that draw of just this is a place where they wanted people to come. And it didn't matter who. And particularly if they were in some way a little different. That difference was valued. And I was definitely different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wasn't Episcopal or Lutheran. So,
Yeah.
the dramatic effect of symmetries infinitely. I read the same thing. The first time I came to this church, overwhelmingly accepted. Swarm was very
Swarmed.
yeah.
Yeah.
All of us.
Yeah.
Just, introduce themselves. Accepted.
Yeah.
It's been like that since the last 4 years.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Well, I came from the Lutheran church, and my dad being the pastor of the Lutheran church, it wasn't all that different from what we had in the Lutheran church to be welcomed into the Episcopal church and combined. So I'd say, we did what we had to do so that both congregations could keep going. And I felt like there were people that just had no problem with it, and that made me feel better.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know what was, something was missing in my life. I had never gone to church, and I came here. My father was coming here, but I didn't tell him I was going to show up on a certain Sunday. And we had a gentleman in this church that sat down next to me, and our daughter too.
Mm-hmm.
And he sat down next to me, showed me ropes.
Mm.
Hymnals and the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
prayer book, and I felt very welcome.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Encouraged.
So, you
Mm.
That's it.
Mm. So you have you have sort of deep inside your feeling of love and acceptance. So my encouragement and my challenge to you is that because that is so deep and so comfortably true, tell that story as if it is happening for the first time. So that what you surface in your story are the details of it. Because the stranger, depending on their temperament, will appreciate the details. And you know those details, but they are absorbed, in a sense, right? They're just so deeply absorbed. Yeah, and so many of you said, and I still feel that today, right? Many of you sort of concluded by saying, and that's still true today. And so perhaps another gentle challenge is, and I'm kind of trying to play the role of that stranger. That stranger might say, well, so what that it was true when you joined this church 40 years ago or 20 years ago. So the time frame isn't important. What's important is the experience. So if it's still true today, then name what that's like today. Tell the story about it today. Nice. So what you were doing there, again, is kind of moving that sense of if love is sitting here in the middle. There's where love is, in the middle of the cross. And it begins with you sort of coming down into that center. It's describing what it's like for you to be in the center. So what is it like for you at the center, or in this case really all saints, people at the center, to send that love back out? So what's your story about that? All saints people love and accept. What's your story? That's the second half. All saints people love and accept, And it looks like this. What does it look like? What are you doing? It's a doing story.
It looks like the SOX program that we're getting ready to execute.
Spirit of Christmas.
Spirit of Christmas for Kids. And through donations, we have shoppers that go out and buy toys. And then we have a list of parents in our community that need assistance, and they come in and they actually shop for the toys. They're allowed so many items, and they're not wrapped, and they get to come in and pick them, and we put them in bags, and they take them home and wrap them as if they're a gift from the parent, not a gift from us.
Great story. Great story. Great story. It looks like this. In another couple of weeks, the Christmas tree that is in our sanctuary will have underneath it dozens of gifts that are unwrapped. And those gifts are for the parents in our community who are the poorest in our community, who will show up and they will shop under that. They will choose of those gifts the ones that they will take with them to gift to their family. Yeah, it's 100. All right, so you see how I just told it a little bit differently, but you tell it. You tell the story so that they're there. Don't tell about it. Tell it. The place is a madhouse. There's so many gifts you can't hardly move. And when the parents come, you've seen this, haven't you? When they come, some of them are just like in tears. And all of them are like, no one has loved on us like this in a long time. No one has loved on us like this in a long time. Yeah, so tell the story. What's another story? All Saints people love and accept. What's the story?
Well, we deliver meals to Child's. We have a nursing home ministry. We volunteer at food pantry
Yep. All right, so,
and Christmas toy project.
yeah, so you're naming again the chimes. And I would say, again, my challenge here is that is don't name the chimes. Name the chime in your head, and then tell the story. You deliver meals, but tell the story. Once a week, there's 5 of us who load up our car and it's full of meals on wheels, or meals. And we deliver those meals to like 15 different people a week, 25 different people a week. And and this one time I forgot to gas the car up before, and I was like, had to stop and put gas in the car because I was running out of gas, but I had these meals that I needed to get there because, we want to give them a hot meal. And I've been doing this for like 15 years. And every year when I go to the eye doctor, I think to myself, oh, the eye doctor better be passing me again because I can't lose my license this year. I won't be able to deliver meals. Tell the story. What's another story? One more story.
A little while ago, we got a call from somebody who had been searching all the churches in Sonoma for a place where they could hold their Girl Scout meetings. And they've been told no over and over again. We don't have the space there that time. And we said yes.
Yeah.
Now they're meeting here, and now they're going to hold the regional gathering of the Girl Scouts here.
What a story. Great story. Great story. So I wonder, again, you'll have to keep noodling around with this a little bit, but I wonder if of all of these four things, that what is really your core value is I am loved and accepted, and all saints people love and accept. And in those two statements contain faith in action, wandering, presence of God, worship. I am loved and accepted, and all saints people love and accept. Maybe that's it. You'll have to noodle around with that a little bit. Because you know what's underneath it, right? So, because remember, your core values are not a dissertation of everything in which they live and have their being. They are something as brief as what I just suggested to you, as brief as that, but because you know what they mean, the story that you tell incorporates what they mean. It incorporates the worship, the wandering. It incorporates the faith in action. It's about love and acceptance, and that seems to be what you are claiming as the core. So if that's your core, that's pretty powerful stuff, I think. All right, so the last thing today, you still have a little bit of energy? A little bit of energy? A little bit, I know. So we'll just begin this because it really is, again, a sense of, it's like the so what. So since this is true, since this is All Saints' core value, I'm loved and accepted is the deep gladness that comes from God, which happens in worship, that answers my wandering soul, that is the presence of God in me and in us. And since All Saints people love and accept, which is our faith in action for those who are wandering, and who want to experience the presence of God, and who wish to find a way to worship. Since that's all true, how do we make this actionable? That's the question. How do you make it actionable? So, on your paper somewhere, write down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 categories. And these come out of your budget. So the first category is pastoral leadership. Pastoral leadership. And leave some space between that and the next one. The next one is building and grounds. Building and grounds. The next one is secretary admin. Again, leave space between those. Secretary admin. The next space is outreach. That's the big category, outreach. O-U-T-R-E-A-C-H. And then worship, music. Music and worship, or worship and music, however you want to put it. And then the last section is the wider church, which means the synod and the diocese. Wider church, synod and diocese. Now those are the big buckets that Warren identified that are part of your, the overall budget have a bunch of line items, but those are your big buckets. So here's sort of the exercise. I am loved and accepted, and all saints, people love and accept, need to live, need to show up in all of the areas of this budget, in every area of this budget. Because remember, your budget gives expression, it supports your core values, your sense of purpose. It doesn't have any other purpose. It has there's no reason for a budget otherwise. It gives a scaffolding to do these two big things that are your heart. And so, you've got the things that we named specifically and checked off. Now, there's and anything else on this too. So what I'd like you to do is give thought to where in that budget those things will then become actionable. And it may not be in every category, but in whatever category you put it, then that will become a place specifically where you as church will financially fund, on the one hand. On the second hand, where you will expect time, talent, and people resources. And on the third, it is the place in which then there is accountability. And so just drop them into some of those categories. I don't know where they belong. I'm guessing that they belong in more than one. But they may not all belong in more than one. But for instance, perhaps because of that current list, everything on that list belongs under music and worship. If in fact you have an expectation that you will both reach out to and some will reach into you who are mentally ill and feel bullied and all ages and LGBTQI and physically handicapped and outcast, right? So some of those folks are going to find their way in here. So therefore they all would go under worship and music. But remember, as soon as they do, the next conversation becomes, in what way does our physical space, does our liturgy, does our music speak to the stranger who is these things? And that becomes, again, your problem to solve. That becomes the excitement of ministry. So where else might some of those belong? Write them in. And we probably don't have time or energy to do it today, but you'll want to sort of begin to get some consensus on that. Because what I'm doing with you in a very general way is helping you to build your budget. Helping you decide where you're going to spend your money and on what. And where you're going to give your time, and where you want your minister, your pastor and priest to give their time. I've got to grab. No, hold on, I've got it. It's in the wrong pocket, that's all. Oh, great. Perfect. Oh, that's good. Thank you. Sorry for those who might be online for blowing my nose right in your ear. My apologies. So how you doing with your list? Almost there? Pastoral leadership is a 1. Building grounds is a 2. Secretary admin is a 3. Outreach is a 4. Music and worship is a 5. Wider church is a 6. Okay, so where does the stranger live? Where would you say? Outreach? Yeah, what else?
Often first contact is with secretary.
Okay. What else?
Building,
Okay. What else? Anything else?
I had it under music.
Ah, okay. 5. Yeah. Is it with pastoral leadership or not?
I have it.
Okay. How about the mentally ill? You got them into pastoral leadership. What else?
Worship and music.
Okay. What else? Outreach. Yep. Got worship. What else? Anything else?
And then it was a wider church also.
Ah, okay. Great. Bully. What else? So,
I had it under secretary and
I also have it under building and grounds as part of safe space.
okay, it seems to sit everywhere, just about. All ages. What else?
building and grounds.
Okay. All right.
It's also under secretary.
It is.
Sends all kinds of stuff out.
Okay. LBG. Where does that belong?
I have it under music and worship
Yep.
and wider church.
Okay.
I also have it under pastoral leadership and building and grounds. And you have it under outreach.
Yeah. And physically handicapped.
And building and grounds. And worship and music. Outreach. Also under secretary, and she sends stuff out to people who are unable to be present.
good. So that's a quick exercise. And so right now, I would suggest that the next part of this exercise, and this becomes, I think, congregational conversation and leadership conversation for sure. But you want to create a priority list. I don't mean a priority of is it mentally ill first and physical handicap last. No, I mean in terms of what bucket, what are the buckets? You have those 6 buckets, and you need to have some way of saying $1 goes in the bucket of pastor, and 50 cents goes in the bucket of worship and music, and 25 cents goes in the bucket of, you follow me? Make a priority, because only in that way do you have a way to measure and have accountability for whether or not you're succeeding, for instance. Yeah. And so you'll want to kind of create spending bucket priority. And if it sits with pastor or admin, then you also need to sort of say, you need to answer the question of time. How much of their time is expected? Are you agreeing, and are they agreeing? Right? It's both, it's a conversation. So how much of that time are you agreeing, are they agreeing to spend in each of these areas of ministry? Understanding that all of these areas are co-equal in value. But again, there's only so much time in a week and in a day, and there's only so much money to go around. Yeah. So there's one more part of this exercise that I want to introduce you to, which is different, a little bit different from this. But alongside of these, and we can do it right now, okay, so there's three categories here. One category is all saints, like all saints collectively, which is all of you, and all of you who are not here. The second category is pastor / admin. So you're 2 staff people. You're two ministry support people. And then the third category is both meaning all saints people and staff, and pastor and admin. So your question right now to answer is, whose is it to do? When it comes to ministry with the mentally ill, to the stranger, to the bully, to the all ages, to LGB, to physically handicapped, whose ministry is it to do? Now, arguably, I would say that it's both. So the question you need to puzzle through is, what's the percentage? And that's an important, and we're not talking about this having to do with, is the pastor earning their keep or not? or is the body of Christ offering its ministry and mission as it's called to? That's not the issue. The issue is, of course, the pastor and admin are doing their ministry, and of course you are. But this is again about getting a little bit more granular around your time and resources. And so as you think about this stuff, it may be, for instance, that the context, and I'm making this up completely right now, but maybe the context is that, and I'm thinking about, Warren, something that you shared earlier. So maybe the context is that 95% of the time, bullied stuff, it comes to his ears first and primarily. And so, it might be both of yours to do, but it's 85% pastor. And what pastor's going to do is hand off then some of the response to that bullying to the community of faith as it's appropriate. And it may be that mentally ill is 65 or 70% community of faith. Because that's because of the context again, of where you all move and so forth, and that really the pastor's involvement is more in the context of what might happen in worship or what might happen as a direct response to some help. So maybe it's more like it's 80% yours and 20% pastor and admin. Is that enough of an example to make sense of this? Okay. But again, this is important because it's the difference between, Tom said, yeah, so we say we're going to do this, but then nothing really changes. And I said, this is about you all having agency. It's about you not being passive. And about you as congregation saying, so this is our ministry. So it is. But this includes making it so that you're able to agree together on how this separates out. And there might be places where it's 50-50. So just to take one more way of this example, so you have like vestry and board.
Yeah, it's called parish leadership.
You've got the parish leadership team meets. So in 2022, what will happen is the parish ministry team will always have as its agenda, I am loved and accepted, and all saints people love and accept. That will be two parts, those are the two big parts of the agenda. And the first part of that agenda will be about measuring how it is we as a leadership team are noticing that we are experiencing the presence of God, that we are being fed, that we are being nurtured. It's the first part of the agenda that's about equipping the saints for ministry. Yeah? The second part of the agenda will be saying, so how are we doing with loving and accepting? With our doing that. Not doing it for each other, but doing it for mentally ill, feeling bullied. And now, those are on the agenda every week. The question is, so how are we doing with these? In what way are we advancing these? And you will know that if the feeling bullied is 90% pastor, then it's pastor who gives that report, in a sense. Pastor says, this is how I've been advancing that this last month. If, on the other hand, mentally ill is 80% the work of the church, then he doesn't give any report about that at all. You all give the report about how that's going and how you're advancing it. So now we're also giving shape to the conversation that takes place in your leadership meetings. And the purpose of those leadership meetings is not to look back and say what's been done. It's always to say, where are we today? And what do we need to do to keep advancing? That's always the purpose of those meetings. Okay. Are you wiped out? I know, thank you. But thank you. I think I've given you a little bit of a shape for like the next conversation. So I think per our agreement, I'm with you probably one more time.
I think so, it was 5 times.
You know, one more time like in January. So if kind of a practical thing to ask yourself is whether or not what I've done with you is enough, or whether or not you would like me to continue to work with you into 22 to continue to give this shape. And that would be extending our agreement. And that's a conversation for you to have between now and when we see each other in January. Or a conversation to have now and then to tell me in January. Because I'm thinking if you were going to extend it, you would need to do that. You'd need to figure that out now with budgeting. But I just want to name that, not because I think that the work you've done is really, really good. And I know that there's still work to do. And part of that is really how do you integrate this into your infrastructure. And how do you live it? Right. And Pastor shared with me that you as congregation are again still at this bit of a tipping point where there is a slice of your community that has chosen to sit on the sidelines. And for a lot of different reasons, but they've not been part of these conversations. And this will become All Saints. And so there is some, just, I think, prayerfully, some work that is how do you manage that as that comes down the pike. And that's gonna come home in 22. That's gonna come home. And I'm happy to walk with you if you would like me to, but I also know that you've done great work. You've done great work. So thank you, everyone. Thank you. Woo-hoo! And a closing prayer. Who's going to pray? Am I going to pray? All right. All right. How remarkable it is, O God, that you spoke into Mary's heart. And in speaking into her heart, she brought forth a Savior, our Savior. She brought forth love incarnate. And since that moment for us in faith, you've been birthing and birthing and birthing and birthing anew all of the time love into the lives of those who follow you and call you by name in the communities of faith that show forth that love. And that's All Saints. So I thank you for coming again in Jesus at Christmas, but I thank you more, really, for coming again right now and anew and always in these faithful ones, in this circle this day, and in the faithful ones that call themselves All Saints people, and the way you keep coming anew in the spirit of this place, so that they will, so that full of your love, they will pour that love back out into their world. They're doing it. I thank you for that. I praise you for that. And with hearts full of gratitude, with hands and hearts open in praise and thanksgiving, we finally say together, Amen.
Thank you, everyone.
You can throw a towel, well, not a towel, a blanket over you, and No, maybe you'd sleep.